And we specifically took you out here to LaGuardia Airport because we want to turn our attention now to some of the impacts from the partial government shutdown. Of course, one of those is going to be travel, specifically at airports, as TSA is one of those agencies that is going to be feeling those impacts. I want to bring us out to this social media post from the TSA regarding this entire situation. It is in 3 parts. I do want to read them all in full for you. They say, quote, the government shutdown will cease pay for all of TSA's more than 63,000 person workforce and suspend non-essential services. Over 99% of that workforce resides in communities across the country. That's according to a senior official performing the duties of Deputy Administration, Adam Stahl. This social media post goes on to say that Democrats should fund the department and stop punishing our workforce and the everyday travelers they serve. A prolonged shutdown could result in significant attrition and increased call-out rates for our officers. And then finally, the third post with this says, including noticeable impacts at airports, delays, longer wait times, and canceled flights. So let's talk about when travelers may be feeling these impacts. Joining us next is going to be Dr. John Rose. He is the Chief Risk Advisor for Altour. It's a global travel management company. John, good to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
So we saw there through TSA, they're already talking about some of those impacts that this partial government shutdown is going to be having. One of those, the fact that a lot of these agents are going to go without pay, at least while this shutdown continues. So based on past experiences and what we have seen with previous government shutdowns, how quickly is that going to be affecting people that are trying to get through these airports?
Well, realistically, this could affect the airports faster than previous government shutdowns. And the reason for that is the recent shutdown was very long, and that had significant impact on the staff financially because they went a long period of time without getting paid. When you have another event like that impacting the lives of those officers, they may have to seek out other types of work just to make ends meet. It's not that they're just calling in as a protest model. When you've got to pay the bills, you may go get another job. Regardless of what that may be, you make ends meet for your family. And if they're still reeling from last fall's shutdown, this may happen faster. As we saw last time, it generally takes a few weeks. You miss a paycheck, and that's when the individuals start getting angrier in terms of, we've got to do something different, maybe call in to show unification amongst the ranks so that Congress acts to fund this, but it's also they've got to make ends meet for their families. So this may happen faster this time than it did last fall. But remember, this is just TSA. The FAA is not part of this particular shutdown, which was the bigger impact last time because of the reduction in air traffic capacity that was allowed.
And we'll talk a little bit about air traffic controllers and their role within this shutdown coming up in just a bit. But going back to the fact that we have seen this before, it's a bit of a deja vu moment, specifically where TSA agents are concerned. What contingency plans are already in place, or are there any in place, just to try to make this process as seamless as possible and to try to keep staff working through these issues?
Well, it's the same as last time where staff are expected to come to work per their job requirements, but they're unpaid. There is no larger contingency plan because there are not thousands of backup employees. That doesn't exist because everyone is unemployed in essence from a paycheck standpoint. There's 61,000 TSA officers. The contingency plans are to attempt to make things work as efficiently as possible and help the traveling public prepare for potentially longer lines. The airlines are prepared for this in terms of understanding that the situations at the airport, but they can't just change schedules in minutes because of the way everything has a ripple effect. If one flight changes scheduled times, that affects that aircraft, all the rest of the flights it has the rest of the day. So everything stretches out in a very negative way. Now, the airlines will do as much as possible to accommodate this, but so much of it's unknown because it's not like there's a set, we're reducing 10% like happened last fall. This will be subject to call-ins and the length of time to get through security at the airports. But they're not going to compromise safety. I make that clear. They will divert whatever resources needed to make sure that the traveling public is as safe as any other day of the year. What they can't do is bring in thousands of more agents if people call in to help with airline screening. So that just may get extremely long at certain airports, depending on the staff count.
That's interesting because on the screen, I did bring up this live image that we have over at the International Airport in Los Angeles. This is LAX. From this vantage point, you can see that there is quite a little bit of a backup of traffic there. So obviously, people are trying to travel during this time, and especially when we talk about some of these major airports that see all of that international travel. It brings me to my next question. When we compare these large international airport hubs across the country, are they in a better position to handle these short of shutdowns? That's a tongue twister. Um, or is it kind of the same as when we see these smaller regional airports? Are they on the same playing field, so to speak?
Well, yes and no. The larger airports obviously have larger staff. So a call in could have a minimal impact if only a smaller percentage call in. If you've got a regional airport that only has 30 staff and 10 call in, that could be a real nightmare scenario for them. A very large airport has other capacity capabilities. The new touchless pre-check is amazing, where you go through with biometrics, and that allows minimal staff to move maximum amount of travelers. And anyone who's used that realizes it only takes seconds to go through. I equate it to pre 9/11 airport security. You're basically walking up to the x-ray machine, and it's fantastic because you can get through maybe in seconds. Now, that's not going to be that way if they have staff shortages, but they have that capacity at some of the larger airports, whereas the regional airports, but they have other advantages because the regional airports generally don't have, say, longer lines or impact on a heavy business travel a Monday morning or a Thursday afternoon that the large airports have. So there's a little more flexibility there. But so I think they're all going to be impacted just in a different manner.
Let's talk about these air traffic controllers. They are remained funded at this time, and you can see the air traffic control tower there off in the distance. Does that reduce the risk of widespread flight delays compared to previous shutdowns? How do they come into play within this entire picture? Because TSA is focused on screening passengers in, but these air traffic controllers are focused on making sure those flights get to and from their destination.
Correct. With the air traffic controllers being funded, there's no scenario where they are going to be calling in, out of sympathy or whatever. I heard someone ask that question the other day in the media. So the capacity reductions because of air traffic safety won't be impacted by this particular event. That shouldn't cause a problem. What could be impacted if the lines get so long at certain airports, some of the airlines might say, we need to reduce capacity because we just can't get our passengers on the plane in time. Now, with enough preparation, this shouldn't be an issue. And the thing to remember, if travelers prepare properly, they can deal with this effectively. One of the things that is a challenge, there's always travelers who want to get to the airport 45 minutes before the flight. That is not a scenario that's realistic if you're planning properly during this shutdown period. If you get there early enough, you can clear, and there's a lot of wonderful tools that the airports have online so you can look at real-time screening delays. Now, that's not advisable for the day you travel because you might be sitting at home and you pull up the airport and it says there's a 2-hour delay and you're realizing I'm not going to get there in time to do this. But if you start looking 1 or 2 days prior at the same time slot, you can get a great feel for how long it takes. And like I told somebody the other day, if you get there and you get through security really fast, so you get to the gate early. Drink a tea and read a book. It's no different than you would have been sitting at home the hour earlier, but now you're not rushing through, panicking you're not going to make your flight. It's just, if you prepare properly, everyone should be able to make their flights in time, and then the whole system stays on track. Again, if some airports get really bad, which we don't foresee that, to where they just don't have enough staff to move through enough of the passengers, the airlines will accommodate, because the big airports, usually you have a major anchor hub airline, and they are very aware of this, and they want to make the experience as positive as possible for the travelers to get them to their next destination. Because remember, a lot of passengers connect, so they've got to get there in time to make their next flight, etc. And this whole thing has a very ripple effect across all of the ecosystem of the travel industry.
And John, I guess that would bring me to my final question here, because there are some unknowns in terms of how long this shutdown is going to last, really how severe some of these impacts are going to be to travelers. So if you have to say one thing to our viewers here who are planning on taking a trip, they're planning to go to an airport, what would be the best advice? Anything else that you would like to add besides the things that you have mentioned throughout this conversation?
Well, I think there's two things. One is, I don't see there's any reason to change your travel right now. However, you may need to alter it. So canceling a trip doesn't make sense, but look at your connection time. If you got a 45-minute or a 50-minute connection, maybe talk to your travel advisor and move that up to 2 hours when you connect at the airports. And also just the constant preparation before you go. Understand how long it's going to take to get through security so you plan appropriately.
Dr. John Rose, the Chief Advisor for Altour. It is the global travel management company. Thank you so much for joining us here at Live Now from Fox. Just bringing back up there that live image we have out of Hartsfield International Airport. But I guess we'll wait to see how long this shutdown lasts and when it will be over, hopefully soon, so we can get those TSA agents working with that pay. But for now, as you mentioned, the FAA not impacted by this partial government shutdown. So air traffic control is still operating as normal. But John, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today.
Of course. We are going to step away for a quick commercial break. We'll continue to follow all of those updates that we get due to this partial government shutdown. Today it is entering day 2. It went into effect just yesterday on Saturday at midnight. So we'll see what happens with Congress going forward, and we'll bring you those developments.